We become confident by looking a certain way or by achieving a certain thing or by making a certain amount of money. And it just doesn't work that way.
Nicole is a podcast host, coach, and author who champions authentic living. With a mix of humor and insight, she challenges gender expectations, celebrates individuality, and is on a mission to help people reconnect with themselves. What's the number one offender or erosive construct behind what breaks our confidence?
The one that is the sneakiest and that we're most unaware of is seeking confidence externally. This idea that something or someone outside of ourselves is going to make us be or feel confident. Whenever we tie our confidence to something outside of us, it's temporary at best, addictive at worst, because the mixed and false messaging we get almost consistently is that is the way we become confident. We become confident by looking a certain way or by achieving a certain thing or by making a certain amount of money, and it just doesn't work that way. Confidence is built internally and can show up in external ways, but it is first and foremost an inside out proposition, not the other way around. And that's the thing that's the most damaging to all of our confidence, because we're out there like rabid validation junkies looking for somebody to make us feel confident.
The idea of job security is outdated as a landline. If you haven't been in a search for a while, it's probable you will at some point, by choice or not. Most executives admit to staying way too long or sense what's coming and justify staying anyway. There's another reason. The faulty belief that navigating to what's next will inevitably be worse and has to suck. Screw that. Lauren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
Well, hello. I hope that this podcast finds you all well. And the reason why we have our guest today, Nicole, Kalil, on is because I've been hearing a lot about the crisis of confidence. And I, for one, I'm raising my hand. I had so many crises of confidence every time I go through a big change. And that could have been when I was divorced or when I stopped drinking, or especially in my professional life. And so today we're going to talk about the 5 keys to lasting confidence. And lasting confidence is not the surface level kind. And who better to talk about this than Nicole, because one of her more recent books and what she is focused on is a book called Validation is for Parking. And her body of work is extensive, especially among women and especially within the depths and breadths of confidence. And so please, listen with your open ears, because this episode is for you. If you're in the middle of any kind of transition, this is not the Band-Aid. This is getting to the root cause. And so thank you so much, Nicole, for being here and for everything that you've done up until this point. Right? You're giving us all the greatest hits, but I'm sure that there was a lot that went on long before you were able to pull together this entire body of work. So tell us a little bit about what brought you to this.
Yeah. So, Lauren, first, thank you for having me, and to your listeners for welcoming me in. Yeah, I mean, as is true for everybody, there's a lot of behind the scenes, and what we often see are only the highlight reels, right? The best moments. And so, that's true for me as is for you, and I'm sure everyone else. My background is as an executive at a Fortune 100 finance firm, and I was in finance for about 15 years, and from the outside looking in, everything looked good. I looked like I was racking up professional successes. I looked the part of the confident, independent woman on the rise. And that's not to say that there weren't good things happening, but how it looked on the outside did not match at all how it felt on the inside. I so much of what I was doing was to prove myself to other people. People pleasing was at the forefront. I was very concerned about looking the part. And it ultimately felt lonely and uncomfortable and inauthentic. And it just sort of occurred to me at one point that I wanted to be as confident as everybody thought that I was. And it was at that time that I began to research confidence for myself. And as it started to make an impact in my life, and as is true for so many of us, once we figure something out for ourselves, we can't help but want to share it with other people. So I began to talk about it with other women in my industry and then other men and then outside of my industry. And it sort of became my life's work, what keeps me up at night and also what gets me up in the morning. So that's what lands me here today. But there's a long sorted history and all of that. And one thing I think is important to stay up front is nobody is 100% confident 100% of the time. Well, other than sociopaths, but obviously we don't want to be that or emulate that. And so it is only ever always a journey for myself and for all of us. So we will have moments of uncertainty. We will have moments of doubt and fear and rejection and all of the icky feelings. But confidence is a choice we get to make in the face of all of those things. It's not something any one of us arrives at, plants a flag, and is like, whew, I'm done. I'm confident, and I never have to worry about it again. It just doesn't work that way.
So I know there's probably not one, but if you had to choose, what's the number one offender or erosive construct behind what breaks our confidence?
Great question. I've actually identified 5. So I could say them quickly, but I would say the number one, the one that I think is the sneakiest and that we're most unaware of, is seeking confidence externally. This idea that something or someone outside of ourselves is going to make us be or feel confident. Whenever we tie our confidence to something outside of us, it's temporary at best, addictive at worst. And so we create all sorts of problems for ourselves, which is really hard because the messaging, the mixed and false messaging we get almost consistently is that that is the way we become confident. We become confident by looking a certain way or by achieving a certain thing or by making a certain amount of money or by having a certain amount of followers on social media or by achieving a certain position or by having perfectly behaved children. I mean, the list is endless, right? We all think that when X happens, whatever X is for us, then we'll feel confident. And it just doesn't work that way. Confidence is built internally and can show up in external ways, but it is first and foremost an inside out proposition, not the other way around. And I think that's probably the thing that's the most damaging to all of our confidence because we're, out there like rabid validation junkies looking for somebody to make us feel confident.
Right. And one of the things that we were just skimming over as you came on the show was that nothing like being in a career transition to start messing around with that feeling of confidence, because what you're talking about is that outside validation, be it the logo of that company. I work for Salesforce or I work for, Google, right?
Right.
That says something about us. And then when that goes away, then the termites, right? The termites that come in and eat away at some of that confidence it's loud. And so you talk about this exterior piece. And now what I really want to know is if we're all wired for external validation, where are the building blocks that you're referring to help us to stabilize and also to really create that structure so that when the next time that thing happens, the Jenga blocks don't fall down?
Yeah. Yeah. So, the most obvious antidote to seeking confidence externally is to focus on building it internally. And as I mentioned before, I identified 5 what I call confidence derailers. These are the things that, knock us off course. And each of those have its own antidote, the 5 confidence builders. And I'll go through all 5 briefly. And all 5 of them work all of the time, anytime you choose them. But one of them is meant to be a specific antidote to a derailer. So if we're talking about seeking confidence externally, its antidote is building it internally. And ultimately, what that means is building internal trust in self. Confidence is the definition of it is firm and bold trust in self. It has been sort of convoluted and mixed messaged over time. But if you go back to the etymology of the word and, what it meant in Latin and how it translated to Middle English and how it translates to every other language, the word most closely associated with the word confidence is the word trust. If you think about its iterations, confidant, a person you trust most, confidential, even con artist isn't somebody who just steals from you. It's somebody who establishes trust first and then steals from you, right? And so understanding that confidence is firm and bold trust in self, and everything else is just, I don't know, noise in my opinion. But then it stands to reason that the most important thing that we can do are things that build trust with and for ourselves. And there are a variety of things that any one of us can be doing. But what I would first ask you to do is consider what builds trust with the people in your life. How do you determine whether or not you trust somebody? How does somebody in your life determine whether or not they trust you? Because whatever the answers are for you gives you insight into what's most important for you. So for me, I trust people who keep their word. I trust people who do what they say they're going to do and say what they mean. I don't trust people very often who are flaky or, wishy-washy or any of those things. And so that's really important for me. So in order for me to build trust with myself, it became very apparent that one of the things I really needed to be mindful of was keeping the commitments that I make, period. But most importantly, the commitments I make to myself. Because as is true for so many of us, we tend to prioritize the commitments we make to other people above the ones that we make to ourselves. And it's actually doing damage to our own internal confidence. So for example, if I say I'm going to work out or eat healthy or, practice some sort of self-care or work on this thing or take this trip or whatever, it is so important that I deliver on those commitments that I make to myself, because anything less does damage to the internal trust that I have with and for myself. So that's one example, but there are plenty of ways that we build trust. So communicating boundaries can be one of them. Celebrating your wins, being your own hype person, being very mindful of the people you surround yourself with. Are they encouraging trust or are they trying to do damage to it? Gosh, there's so many. I'm blanking.
So I want to take a pause here, because what I heard you say is something that I actually say on a pretty regular basis, especially when I'm evaluating either myself and or folks that we want to work with, right? So I always say it's an inside job. So before you get that outside job, you great for your resume, great for your LinkedIn profile, but if that inside job does not match those other things, what you just said, right? That trust will be shaky. People will probably experience that disconnect, which also doesn't help with your networking or your interviewing or anything else. People will have a hard time following. I'm not talking about followers on social media, following your direction, because that groundwork isn't solidified. And so same with me. My number one value is in integrity. And that means that what I say and what I do, they gotta be in like tight communicado all the time. First to myself and then to other people. And so what happens if you're saying to yourself, you know what? Like, I get I get what you're saying, but how do I hold myself accountable to that? Like, who can help me to actually do that? Because I'm still a work in progress, right?
Sure.
Nobody's doing this like, to the level of perfection all the time. So how do I do this so that I know that I'm not falling backwards even when I mess up?
Yeah. So, great question. First, I want to reiterate what you already said. This is not about perfectionism. Perfectionism is one of the confidence derailers. It doesn't work. So, nobody, again, keeps 100% of their commitments 100% of the time, but try to keep more than you don't and be mindful, about the commitments you make. I think a few tactics that can be really helpful here. First and foremost, don't overcommit. I think we have a tendency in today's day and age to overcommit. We default to yes. We say yes to too many things. We say yes when we mean maybe or we mean no. And it's doing a ton of damage because no matter what our intention was when we made the commitment, we made the commitment. When we fall short or don't follow through, we're doing damage. So I think being mindful about not overcommitting and being mindful to call it what it is, if it is a commitment or if it's something else. So I'll give an example. If I'm career searching, and it has been a very long time since I have done career searching, but if I'm doing that, I'm going to consider a lot of things a test versus a commitment. I'm going to test sending my resume to X people in this industry that I have maybe been interested in but never worked in before. I'm going to test, answering this interview question in this way and see how it feels for me and things like that. There's a difference between a commitment and a test, or a commitment and a hypothesis, or a commitment and I'm going to do my best. And making the distinction, I think, is really important. So if it's a commitment and you make a commitment, then you've got to do your best. I'm not talking about perfectionism. I am talking about doing whatever is within your control to try to meet that commitment. I think that makes a very big difference. And as you said, reinforces that feeling of integrity. And authenticity and integrity are something that, well, listen, I've never met anybody in a job interview who's like, hey, I'm kind of low integrity. Like, it would be refreshingly honest. It would be high integrity for them to do it, but nobody's ever going to say that. Everybody always talks about how hardworking they are and how high integrity they are. But I think those are things often that you feel. You can feel when somebody's being authentic. You can feel when somebody is of integrity and their actions align and things like that. And I think it's really, really important that we do whatever is within our control to maintain that within ourselves so that other people can experience it.
I am blowing the lid off of our best kept secret, our 30-day blast program. Yeah, you heard it. 30 days. We have seen so much success for this program that past clients have landed in that 30 days and increased their compensation 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, over 100%. Now, not everybody lands and earns that much in 30 days, but my point is it prepares you. And in 30 days, if you're not out of there with a changed mindset and changed clear and simple ways to be able to navigate the market this year, then we'll gladly refund your misery and you can go back to applying now. Check out the link below for the next 30-day blast, and we would love to have you there because we live for your success, and that's what's really important. See you then.
So take us to block number 2. So now we've got this, like, let's just call it like ground level. What comes after that?
Yeah. So I mentioned it already, but perfectionism is one of the confidence derailers, and its antidote is failure. It's allowing yourself the opportunity to fail and understanding that failure is a neutral event. And I want to be very clear. I know none of us experience it as neutral when it's happening to us. It sucks. It feels awful. But the important thing that we recognize in those moments is that it is something that we are interpreting. It's a perception. If I had 10 people experience the exact same event, we'd get 10 different interpretations of the event. And if that's true, if you buy into that for just a second, then we have the opportunity to create an interpretation or perception that benefits and works for us. Instead of seeing it as a failure, could you see it as a lesson, as an opportunity, as a redirect, As a one door closes, so many others can open. As a unanswered prayer. I don't care what you call it. I do care what you do with it. Because it's in the face of perceived failure or rejection or mistakes or fear or doubt. It's the choice we make in those moments that actually build deep, lasting confidence. Because it's so easy to trust yourself when you're winning. It's so easy to trust yourself when everything's going according to plan, when you're achieving at the highest levels. Yeah.
Same thing. And then you go from, like, I had a friend that used to say, you go from hot shit to piece of shit very quickly.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, exactly. Yep. But to choose to trust yourself when you're experiencing those hard emotions of fear, failure, doubt, whatever it might be, to choose to trust yourself in the face of that is where deep, lasting confidence gets built. And I want to be clear too. I think sometimes people think when I'm confident, that means I'm going to get whatever it is that I want, or the outcome is going to be wonderful or great. And as far as I can tell, confidence doesn't determine the outcome, but it does determine about how you feel about yourself as you're going through it. When I show up to something with confidence, when I choose confidence in myself, I choose to trust myself firmly and boldly. I may not get the result that I want, but the opportunity is to trust that I'll be okay regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
this is permeating so deep for me, because I used to say things like it was an epic fail, or things first of all very dramatic, right? But
yep. But I mean, we usually tend to be very over dramatic about the bad stuff, right?
Right. And then like some small win will happen. Of course, it gets dismissed. But when you are in, let's say, a job search, or you are, at that final stage, maybe you're trying to negotiate a compensation package that feels like you're taking a risk and it's high stakes, and it doesn't pull through the way that you want it to. Is there a catchphrase or a way that I can kind of take it in the moment? I'm not talking about with reflection, so that I don't get into the epic fail spiral.
Yeah. Great question. I'm glad you asked. What I say to myself, and your opportunity is find whatever it is that works for you. But what I say to myself is the only thing that's missing right now from me, from this situation, is the benefit of hindsight. I tell myself that so often. The only thing that's missing, I didn't get the job I wanted. The only thing that's missing, I didn't get the outcome or the result or the whatever. The only thing that's missing from me is the benefit of hindsight. I don't yet know how this will work in my favor, but I get to trust that it will, because I think we've all had experiences where we can look back and we didn't get something we wanted, or it didn't work out the way we thought. And with the benefit of hindsight, we're like, oh, thank freaking God. Like, I think about the person I thought I wanted to marry in my 20s. I could not be any more grateful that didn't work out. With the benefit of hindsight, I can look back and be like, oh, thank God. But at the time, it was extreme heartbreak. It was like the worst thing, right? And so I don't know if that catchphrase will work for everybody, but it certainly works for me. And again, it still sucks when I'm experiencing it, but my opportunity is to move through it faster. And that catchphrase, the only thing that's missing for me from the situation is the benefit of hindsight.
Oh, okay. New Post-it for me. Number 3. So we've gotten to the whole idea of establishing the internal level of confidence, not relying on external factors. Then we move to perfectionism and
failure. Yep.
And the excitement of your failure partnership.
Yep. Okay, so the next one is head trash is the derailer. I call it head trash because I want it to sound as dirty and disgusting as it actually is, but you could call it your inner critic or negative thoughts. I don't care what you call it, but the reality is we all have this voice inside of our heads who says things to us about us that are never kind and very rarely true, like very rarely based in fact. And so we're beating ourselves up constantly with head trash, and the antidote is giving yourself grace. It's communicating to yourself about yourself the same way you would anyone you love. And what I find to myself, and because we should first and foremost be someone that we love, right? So what I find myself doing when I catch head trash going, and it inevitably will. There's a quote that I love. It says, "You can't prevent a bird from flying over your head, but you can prevent it from building a nest in your hair." And that's what I think of when I think of head trash. You can't prevent the negative thought from jumping in, but what you can do is prevent it from taking up space and festering and just being,
Lodging in there, right?
Exactly. And so what I often ask myself is, what would I say to my best friend or my partner or my daughter in this situation? If any one of those if any one of those people were experiencing the same set of circumstances that I'm currently facing, what would I tell them? Because the reality is I'm always much kinder, much more encouraging, much more supportive when I'm thinking about it in that lens versus how I'm being with myself. And so I think that's just a really important tweak.
Yeah. I think I've also often called the space between my ears the bullshit manufacturing plant.
It's exactly right.
And so what I also want to add to this, not add to the trash, right, is stay away from other trashy messages. Negativity, people who are complaining about the marketplace. Oh, the market is so bad. The market is so bad. I must hear that, all the time. But somebody's still getting hired in this so bad marketplace. And somebody is also doing that with many of the tenants that you're referring to, right? It didn't happen by accident. They are just training themselves in a way that you can train yourself to stay away from the things that are going to also clearly pull down that vibration, which translates into how you show up, which translates into how others experience you. So, I mean, those head trash things, while they can be in high levels of production during periods of change, I encourage, and I say this to my clients, I say this to myself, I say this to my relationships, get out of the cesspool.
Yeah.
Right? There's always a door that will take you out, but the longer that you marinate in there, the smellier it gets. Let's just face it.
1000%, Lauren. I couldn't agree more. Because I believe confidence to be an internal thing, I often say nobody can give you confidence and nobody can take it away. But there are definitely encouragers and there are definitely detractors, and you get to choose which one you spend your time with, because whoever it is you spend your time with is they're going to do their part. They're either going to encourage or they're going to detract. And why would you spend any time with people who are going to detract?
All right. So we're taking out the head trash. We're taking it out to the curb.
Yeah.
Kicking it away. And what comes after that? What's number 4?
So overthinking is the derailer. I want to be very clear. Thinking is not a problem. We should all be doing it. It's the over part that's problematic. And overthinking is a problem because it leads to inaction. And inaction is problematic because it leads to our biggest regrets. We talk to people who are at the end stages of life or the most confident or the most successful people and ask them about their biggest regrets. 90+% of the time, they're going to tell you about the things that they didn't do, the risks they didn't take, the dreams they didn't chase, the conversations they didn't have, the forgiveness they didn't give. They're going to focus so much more on the things they didn't do, not the things that they did, which is why overthinking derails our confidence. And of course, the antidote then would be action. Action builds confidence. One foot in front of the other towards what matters. Little risks built up over time lead to big confidence. Action builds confidence.
Okay. Hand up. How do I diagnose my own overthinking?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because as a fellow recovering overthinker, I was like overthinking my overthinking, right? Like, how do I know when I'm overthinking? So I think the easiest is if you're in inaction, you're probably overthinking, because you can think and act at the same time. But if you're not doing anything, you're probably stuck in overthinking. But there's actual science behind this. There's studies that have been done, first in the military. And what they found is somewhere between having 40 to 70% of the information, research, answered questions, all the things you think you need, that's the appropriate time to take action, 40 to 70% of that, which is hard for many of us overthinkers because we want to get to 100%. We want to have all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed and all the questions answered before we'll move forward. and they found that that was too late for meaningful action.
Mm.
Then they redid the study again at Wharton School of Business, and they found pretty much the same thing. So the answer is we want to be in action when we have somewhere between 40 to 70% of the information, data, research, checked boxes, whatever you want to call it, that we think we need in order to move forward.
Okay. Tough question on the 40 to 70. Do men or women vacillate between the density of needs to know? Is there a difference? Because I have a suspicion, and you probably have a better one.
Yeah. So again, also studies have been done on this, and it's pretty consistently proven that women want to be 80 to 100% ready before they'll take action, whereas men are a little bit closer to that 50 to 60% range. And so I don't think this is naturally. I think this is socialized behavior, but I think, men have, based on studies, the more likelihood to fall in that 40 to 70%, I'm just going to put in air quotes, ideal range, whereas women, we have to be mindful about this. Now, there are men who are highly analytical overthinkers, just like there are women. So we all need to be mindful of it. The derailer and the antidote are gender neutral, but yes, I think women fall into this trap significantly more. And I also think it's one of the derailers that you can kind of get a sense based on somebody's career choice. Engineers, actuaries, like they're things that overthinkers tend to gravitate towards career-wise that could also give some insight.
Since you and I are both women and we work with a lot of women, on that note of overthinking, and I love having this 40, 70%, right? What would you say to them aside from just like put your big girl pants on and take some action? What would you say as either a confidence coach, as somebody who is really like you're just done with them overthinking whatever that scenario is? What would be the kick in the pants that person might need to hear?
Yeah, so great question. And I think, asking people to flash forward 6 months, 3 years, whatever a time frame is, and just ask, what would you regret more?
Mm-hmm.
Taking action and making mistakes and learning, or not taking action at all, that type of thing. Sometimes putting ourselves on the other side of something and looking back can give us a little bit more clarity. I said this a little earlier with giving grace, but often I ask myself, what would I want my daughter to do in this situation? Because I always want the best for her. And I think of her at the highest, I have the highest regard for her. So if I would want her to jump into the deep end of the pool or get into action, then I think, well, if that's what I want for her, then that's what I should want for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And last thing is, I do think there's a quote that often helps me is both fear and hope require us to believe in something that we cannot see.
Mm-hmm.
So you choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think what is happening in a lot of cases when we're overthinking is that we are putting our trust in fear and not in hope.
Totally.
And again, both of them, they're the same. So there's a lot of quotes that I like or memes, and it's like, grab fear by one hand, grab hope by the other, and start moving. That's what I think of for myself in those overthinking moments.
Okay, so now that we've exterminated some head trash, what comes on top of that? What's number 5?
Okay, so the last one is comparison, and judgment is the derailer. Again, I think we've always compared ourselves to other people and had that feeling of coming up short or thinking that we're better than. But with social media, I don't know that it's ever been easier than it is today to fall into the comparison trap. I mean, in a matter of seconds, you can feel worse or better about yourself. And I think the distinction is really important. Arrogance is when you compare yourself to somebody else and feel better than. Insecurity is when you compare yourself to someone else and feel less than. Confidence is not needing to compare yourself to anyone at all.
Ooh,
So
drop.
big
That's
distinction.
fun.
Yeah. And I think, the problem with comparison more often than not in today's day and age is we're not comparing like with like. We're comparing somebody's best moments with our everyday behind the scenes lives. We only see on social media what people want us to see. And then we have the audacity to compare our normal, behind the scenes lives to it and feel like there's something wrong with us. So we've fallen short in some way. And even when people share their failures or their mistakes or their missteps, we almost are always hearing about it when they're on the other side, right? We know that J.K. Rowling got rejected, I don't know how many times for Harry Potter. And it's like, that's a great story now that Harry Potter exists. Right?
Hindsight, right?
Yeah, it's the hindsight part. So, just a friendly reminder that it isn't fair to compare yourself to those little highlight reels, right? Those moments. And the antidote is choosing confidence. It's going back to that not needing to compare yourself to anyone at all. And it's making the distinction that confidence isn't a feeling, it's a choice. I think a lot of us think we either feel confident or we don't, as if we have no control over it. I can't go interview for that job if I don't feel confident. It's like, no, you choose confidence and then you go interview for the job. And I find that to be great news because that means it's a skill that we can develop and it's something that any one of us can choose anytime we want versus sitting around and waiting for the feeling to arrive. And I think we do this more often than we give ourselves credit for. We very often in our days and in our lives choose to show up at our best, even if something bad just happened, or even if we're not feeling motivated, or even if we're not feeling all so great. We have examples of that. And so it's just a reminder that we can. So it's choosing to trust yourself firmly and boldly. It's choosing to show up at your best. It's choosing to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get back into action towards what matters most. Those are the ways that we choose confidence in the face of comparison or judgment.
It's very interesting because last week alone, I talked to 7 different HR executives. 7. And many of them have now become clients. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? This is either going to turn into a competitive comparison game, or these folks with our support are going to actually be able to provide themselves with even more connectivity, collaboration, confidence, because they all are in such a distinct and necessary function that is under siege right now. And so they're from different areas of the country and they have different strains of their areas of expertise. And so not one of them, and I've been very transparent about, by the way, we're just literally getting an influx of this audience, and I'm not surprised given everything that's going on. But what I really encourage you to do is align and build your alliances, because you will all win if you do that. If one of you gets in there and starts thinking that there's, that you guys are competing against each other, competing, comparison, and complaining, those 3 C's, I talk about them a lot in my personal life because that will bring you down. Look for those areas that aren't going to create a camp over here and a camp over there, and find that middle ground. And I love that you talked about, I could go in this direction, I could go in that direction, but confidence is owning the space in the middle.
Yeah. So, and I'll add to with your 3 C's, and I love those, is what I often tell myself when I'm feeling competitive or when I find myself in that comparison trap is it's giving me insight into something that I want. Like if I take them out of the equation, it's like, okay, what's happening here? Okay, it's giving me insight into I want more freedom, or I want more success, or I want to feel better about something or whatever. And it's not about them at all. It's about something that I want. And the good news is I have everything to say about giving myself the opportunity to create whatever it is that I want. I couldn't agree more that abundance and collaboration and having a strong network of people, that's only ever going to benefit you. And I haven't read the stats recently, but from my perspective, HR is pretty female dominated, and there's nothing but opportunity. Yes, there's a ton of needs and there's a ton of messy stuff going on in our environment today, but these roles are necessary. The people component of any company is always going to be necessary. I also will add, the research is pretty clear. Women from age about 10 to about 40, generally speaking, have less confidence than their male counterparts. And so this is something we have some control over, that we can do something about. And these are big decades, right? This is where we're making really big career and life decisions. I say, why not do it with more confidence?
100. I mean, I hear so much, that part of the reason why women are in whatever career they're in and want to take risks and want to impact and want that seat at the table also is to create the next generation of other women leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so just know it doesn't live in a vacuum. Your confidence is also being felt and experienced by others, including your kids, men or women, obviously.
Yep.
And you get to, this is what I would consider a high honor, right? You get to do this. And I just can't thank you enough, Nicole, for really breaking this down. I have learned so much, and I have had many missteps in my confidence building. And I have lots of little notes here for my Post-its that I love to revisit on a very regular basis. Tell us where we can find you. I know about your podcast, but tell everybody else where they should follow you, because you're not really like a huge social media.
Right. Yeah.
Person.
Don't find me on social media. I'm not posting there. Okay. So probably the most relevant to you, the listener, is we have a derailleur quiz. If you go to NicoleKalil.com/confidence quiz, you can actually take a quiz and determine which of these derailleurs is impacting you the most. And then we'll provide you with the appropriate builder and some resources and some things so that you can begin to build your confidence in the most relevant and important way for you today. So NicoleKalil.com is the website.
We'll put that link in the show notes.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, and then if you're looking for another encouraging voice, obviously continue to listen to this podcast, but I also have a podcast called This Is Woman's Work, and we cover all sorts of amazing, important, relevant topics to women. So it's a fun one.
Excellent. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you again, Nicole. And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, you know it. I'm just going to ask you, give us some love, give us some sugar. Please write a podcast review on Apple Podcasts. This is what helps keep us going. And write one for Nicole's podcast, too, while you're there. Really, you have no idea. This is the easiest thing that you could do to let us know and help us build our confidence, right? So I appreciate that. We know we got it going on, but it always feels good to get a podcast review. Thank you so much. And Nicole, I will see you very, very soon on your podcast, and I can't wait.
My pleasure. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now, and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next Career Blast in a Half. Most of all, thank you for you.